Good afternoon, Shalom. Um, our first reading comes from Psalm, the 19th Psalm, verses 1 and 2. The heavens declare the glory of God, the dome of the sky speaks the work of his hands. Every day it utters speech, every night it reveals knowledge. Second reading comes from the writings of Dr. Gerald Schroeder, his book, The Hidden Face of God, page 1. Theology brings us the amazing concept of a metaphysical force that brought the physical universe into being. The universe is the physical expression of the metaphysical. All that we know of the putative creator is found within the physical creation. With this in mind, it is incongruous to describe a theology without the insights of science. And the third reading comes from, is attributed to Dr. Werner Heisenberg by his biographer Heinz Otremba. The first drink from the cup of natural science makes you an atheist, but at the bottom of the cup, God awaits. Well, today is the third Sunday of Lent in the Christian liturgical calendar. Yesterday was St. Joseph's Day, and next Friday is both the Feast of St. Mark and the Feast of the Annunciation of the Lord. The Solemnity of the Annunciation commemorates Gabriel delivering the message to Mary that she was going to give birth to the Messiah. It is set 9 months before Christmas, which we are fairly certain was not the actual date of his birth anyway. Thus, the festival has been somewhat downgraded and de-emphasized in many modern Christian denominations. Today is the 17th of Second Adar on the Jewish calendar, and on the celestial calendar, it is the vernal equinox, the first day of spring. Well, we are continuing with our lessons on the process of getting to know God by looking at an unconventional source. In recent years, there has been a growing trend in many flavors of Christianity to adopt an anti-science stance. This has led to a number of unfortunate consequences, not the least of which is that Christianity has been given the appearance of being a refuge for the ignorant. In American Christianity in particular, this appearance has a degree of justification. An abundance of conspiracy theories, denial of scientific evidence, and even the phenomenal expansion of the idea that the earth is flat has led many non-believers and a significant number of believers to view their countrymen with contempt. While that is, frankly, pretty easy to do, we need to remember that they, too, are also created in the image of God. The growing schism between deists and atheists is aggravated by the attitudes of many of the religious towards science and the study of natural law. In part, this is created by a difference in perspective. Religion is, at least in part, the search for truth. Science, for the most part, is the search for facts. But because religion claims to study the infinite and eternal, there is an annoying tendency to consider any truth that we discover to be treated as eternal and unchanging. Now, while God may be infallible, we are not. But if we never re-examine what we think we know, our version of truth becomes fossilized. And when a fallacy in our reasoning is pointed out, we consider it an attack on God rather than an attack on human reasoning. Science, on the other hand, constantly revises its dogma in the light of new information or new understandings. When new knowledge comes to light, science subjects it to a rigorous examination procedure called the scientific method. And if it stands up to that process, it becomes the new orthodoxy. It may continue to be debated for years, but this is not seen as a threat, but rather as part of the process. The dissenters are still considered scientists, they still have their standing in their profession, and the search for facts goes on. But when someone in the religious community develops a new understanding, the religious establishment typically rallies against them, branding them apostate or heretic, and inviting them to leave the flock of the faithful. Thus, religion, in its rejection of the new without examination, has moved farther and farther away from its sister discipline, science. But science is the examination of the physical world, which religion maintains was designed and created by God. Ideally, every new scientific discovery, once it has been subjected to the examination of competent scholars, should be greeted by religion with joy as an additional revelation into the mind and nature of God. Science should inform religion, and religion should be welcome among the scientific community. Alas, that is not the case. A great many scientists hold religious beliefs, but they typically remain very quiet about it because such beliefs are unwelcome among the atheistic thinkers who have staked their claim on science as their exclusive domain. They typically also remain silent because they get little or no support from the religious community, since their personal beliefs are informed by their knowledge of science, which typically leads them to reject the old bearded man in a white robe model of God, which is still taught by many churches. Two cases in point are represented by two of the quotes that we started with. Werner Heisenberg was a brilliant physicist, a Nobel laureate, and one of the founders of the atomic age. He was one of the primary developers of the theories of quantum mechanics. He wrote a number of statements that would pique the interest, or should pique the interest, of the religious. We have to remember that what we observe is not nature herself, but nature exposed by our method of questioning. Another was, it will never be possible by pure reason to arrive at some absolute truth. But the quote for which he is most famous among the religious community is the one that we started with. The first drink from the cup of natural science makes one an atheist. But at the bottom of the cup, God awaits. Of all the things that Heisenberg is said to have taught, this is the one that is most disputed. It was reported by his biographer, and almost immediately was greeted with uproar among the more atheistic elements of the scientific community. They maintained that he never wrote it in any of his books, that he was not a religious man, and therefore he could not possibly have such a thing to Otremba, his biographer. Yet another biographer gives us this insight into the man. In 1929, Heisenberg spent some time in India as the guest of the celebrated Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore, with whom he had long conversations about science and Indian philosophy. This introduction to Indian thought brought Heisenberg great comfort. he told me. He began to see that recognition of relativity, interconnectedness, and impermanence as fundamental aspects of physical reality, which had been so difficult for himself and his fellow physicists, was the very basis of the Indian spiritual traditions. After these conversations with Tagore, he said, some of the ideas that had seemed so crazy suddenly made more sense. That was a great help for me. And this is from the writings of Fritjof Capra, his book Uncommon Wisdom, 1988, page 43. The other scientist that we cited was Dr. Gerald L. Schroeder. Schroeder earned his Bachelor of Science in 1959, his Master of Science in 1961, and a PhD in 1965 from MIT. His doctorate was in nuclear physics and earth and planetary sciences. He worked for 7 years on the staff of the physics department of MIT, served on the Atomic Energy Commission, and then moved to Israel, where he worked as a researcher at the Weizmann Institute of Science, the Volcani Research Institute, and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He currently teaches at the Aish HaTorah College of Jewish Studies. He has published a number of books, including The Science of God and the one from which our quote is taken, The Hidden Face of God. He is, however, perhaps most famous or infamous, depending on one's perspective, for his work in reconciling the six-day creation account in the Tanakh with the theories of modern physics. Using the so-called stretching factor of time and space postulated in Einstein's theory of relativity, he has computed a comparison between the age of the universe as calculated by human physicists with the age of the universe at the point of the Big Bang. Here on Earth, in our time and place, the universe is calculated to be somewhere in the vicinity of 13.8 to 15 billion years old. But after doing all the math, the universe at the point of origin, the theoretical location of the Big Bang, he finds that the universe is 6 days old. This caused a tremendous uproar among the atheistic faction of the scientific community, yet so far, his computations stand up. And a prominent academic philosopher, Antony Flew, who had spent most of his adult life promoting atheism, indicated that Dr. Schroeder's work was instrumental in his decision to become a deist. Religion and science are natural allies in the search for understanding the infinite. Their difference in perspective and approach should allow each to help keep the other honest. Neither should act as if they were threatened by the other. So in your search to know God, embrace fearlessly the developing knowledge of science. May Yahweh bless you and watch over you. May Yahweh smile on you and be gracious to you. May Yahweh look upon you with favor and give you shalom. Amen.